Welcome to First Baptist Church. I'm Betty Iverson, the church historian. History has been my hobby, and I have developed this archives of history getting ready for the 100th anniversary of First Baptist. First Baptist was formed in 1917 in January of that year, 2 years prior to the city's being incorporated. Mr. Will Roller, a banker who had relatives as charter members of this church, financed the initial building. And the cost of the initial building was $10,000. It was Gothic in design, facing Sullivan Street, and it served the growing community for 10 years, and then additions had to be made. So the current sanctuary was dedicated in 1927. There was an enormous debt to provide a huge sanctuary, and so 33 men who were members of this church signed the note at the bank. And then the Great Depression happened. And so those men and their families must have felt the responsibility, but in the mid-40s, the building debt was retired. Since that time, as the church has grown, maybe faster than Kingsport, the additional property was acquired, one residential lot at a time, so that there was expansion to the corner of Holston and Charlemont, where we have a multi-story building that houses the church fellowship hall and a gymnasium. The gymnasium has benefited the entire community, as has the fellowship hall, and this is a part of our purpose here, to reach out to the entire community. Currently under construction, which joins the two facilities, is a children's building, because the intent here is to have daycare because of the large number of working moms. And so, and the children are now in basement rooms, and the children will be above ground and will have access to a playground. And I'm sure we will meet state codes for child care also. The sanctuary is being remodeled because the sound system is obsolete and the choir loft is too small. Music has been an enormous part of this church. Now, I think of what I have just said as facilities. I think of the church as the members who belong to the church. We have a very large staff, 4 ministers, a financial staff, 3 secretaries, nursery school staff, custodial staff, and I may have even missed some, because to maintain the facility and to offer weekday programs, it takes a very, very large staff. Dr. Marvin Cameron is our senior minister, and he has an associate pastor, and we have a minister of education and a minister of music, all of whom are full-time. The membership has reached 2,500. The church has a quarterly business conference, and I noticed this stat at the last handout that we got at the church conference. People come and go all the time, and we have such an elderly membership that unfortunately people are dying all the time too. But the church is very viable and continues to grow, for which we are grateful. And as I look back, I'm grateful for those 45 people who were charter members of this church, who worshiped in that first small sanctuary. We have some descendants of those folks still in this church. Dr. C.P. Edwards, one of the early physicians, and his family were charter members of this church. And one of his daughters, one granddaughter, a great-granddaughter, and a great-great-granddaughter have been members of this church. And we have several other families who have been here for 4 generations. The church has a multitude of ministries, weekday as well as Sunday. On Sunday evening, the church accommodates Celebrate Recovery, which is a program for people who have hurts, habits, and hang-ups. And this is a very confidential program. It isn't part of a national program. And it's the 10-step program with a spiritual dimension to it. That group is meeting here now, but we also have a building at 441 Clay Street when they often meet, and the construction has caused a lot of adjustments. For the weekday ministry, we have the Providence Medical Clinic, which also meets at 441 Clay Street. And 4 times a year, we host homeless families who are part of Interfaith Hospitality Network. And we were one of the pioneer churches in that ministry 15 years ago. And so we have helped a lot of homeless families to have food and housing while they were in the program, and various people have helped those people get situated in housing and in jobs also. I'm going to refer to some of the printed notes because I do not want to skip any ministries. We have recreational activities, including sports teams. There is an annual 5K race called Amazing Grace. And we have support groups through the Counseling Center for grief, divorce, boundaries, losing to live, dieting and exercise for a healthy lifestyle. And we have built 18 habitat houses in the last few years. And of course, for the centennial year, we will be building at least 1 habitat house. And annually, we have groups going on mission trips to Belize, Panama, Los Angeles, and New York City. I think a group also went to Washington, D.C. this year. And so it is a very active congregation. The original building is still on the grounds, and we can see that facility if you like. We're sitting in what was a part of the original building now. And the wall with these pictures may have been an outside wall for the original building. As the facilities grew, this became the pastor's study, and there was a fireplace, which probably made for a cozy pastor's study. And so, of course, there had to be a chimney there, so this is why I think it was an outside wall. The original sanctuary was 2 stories tall with a vaulted ceiling, and so that has been partitioned off as a current chapel, which houses small groups and a few weddings and a few memorial services. And we're just so glad that all of these current facilities could be built around the original building, because there is no way to offer the variety of programs that we offer without facilities to accommodate them. I think it's also interesting that First Baptist Church, this church was responsible for the neighborhood Baptist churches, in that we sent people out to help organize in the various neighborhoods, which was a convenience, and which is the preference of some people, to be in a smaller situation also. And I really have to pay tribute to our youth work. We have stats that churches in general are losing young people. When surveys are made, the people who write none for their denominations or their beliefs have grown, but we have a youth minister, and we have the gymnasium, and we have renovated quarters for middle school and high school, and projects galore. So we are keeping our young people to a very great extent. I think J. Fred Johnson was still living when I came to Kingsport. And of course, as we read in the Times News yesterday, August 21st, Vince Staten's finishing of the book about some of the leaders of Kingsport, he mentioned that George L. Carter should be given a lot of credit. Mr. Carter bought 12 miles of land, or 12 miles, beginning at the top of Chestnut Ridge and going to 2 miles beyond Rotherwood, so that he could build a railroad to get the coal from the mines he owned in Southwest Virginia to the markets in other places. He was a brother-in-law of J. Fred Johnson, so he hired J. Fred Johnson to develop the town. And there came from New York John B. Dennis and various other consultants. I understand that the Dennises lived in Rotherwood and were very, very involved in everything that happened here. In knowing some of the forebearers, I have learned where all of the original things were in modern Kingsport, like a hospital across the street from this church in this neighborhood. And I well remember some of the early physicians who were still living when I came here. And so I think the larger hospital, Holston Valley, was absolutely necessary with the growing population. We will wait to see if there's a merger and what that presents to us. And I understand that downtown is coming back after being nearly abandoned. There is more activity there and more eating places, and which creates people coming downtown. As far as beyond this time, I think we cannot let the 100 years be too much with us until we become forward thinking. Now, I don't know if we can grow into Scott County. We may have a governmental, geographical barrier there, but I think it is significant that we have grown into Hawkins County, and I think it's unfortunate that each of the Tri-Cities is somewhat territorial, because I envision a metro school system. That's the main visioning that I have personally, having taught for a couple of years and finding out that I'm a religious educator and a social worker rather than a school teacher, because I didn't like to decipher children's handwriting or grade papers in the olden days. So I envision a metro school system because the population of young people and children is declining, as the birth rate would accommodate that. So that is the main thing I see that I think would be beneficial. This is true. I think we also have some culture to offer with the symphony and the various skills, and we have recreation to offer. And residential developments are happening all the time. And so I do not know about the jobs picture, and yet periodically to the area come new small businesses, and people are transferred in, and I'm sure that people are hired in also. So I would just say, come on down.